people about the work of God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you see, it's just like human beings, we were created for life. We were created for life and for an abundant life.
Right.
So whether we recognize it or not, in the deepest part of our being, we yearn for life. We have a yearning for life.
Yep.
That's why when we see things that aren't life, they tend to bother us.
Mm-hmm.
They move us, they shake us. We can experience a myriad of emotions. From anger, discontentment, dissatisfaction, frustration. I mean, we can experience a number of things when we see that. So human beings were created to have life. Well, what happened is we found ourselves in a world that was clothed in death and darkness. And we were also clothed in death and darkness. Right? And so if we're created for life and we're smack dab in the middle of an earth that has been swallowed up in death and darkness, and our bodies have been swallowed up in death and darkness, we're all the time going to feel something called agitation in our soul, which will lead to a laboring and toiling to try to get life. Bring forth life in the earth,
Sure.
Bring forth life in ourselves. The word of reconciliation declares to all human beings what God has done to reconcile this planet back to himself and eternal life,
Right.
and reconcile mankind back to eternal life. Right?
Wow.
It's the word of what he's done.
Right.
So God's done a work. You notice in the first creation, God did a bunch of works.
Right.
And then after he finished all the work, he made man.
Yep.
And then man's only deal was that they were going to rest in his work. God did everything for man to have eternal life. He did everything for the earth to be baptized in eternal life. All man needed to do was to walk in his good work. So all God wanted to do was meet with man in the midst of the garden, and he wanted to influence man by revealing the work of what he'd done to give them everything that pertained to life and godliness as a free gift.
Wow.
Right?
Yes.
And so he wanted to influence man to walk in his good work, or to enter into his rest.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay? And so what the word of reconciliation is it's a type of that happening all over again. Just like in the original creation where God did a work, and everything that was needed for man to have life and godliness was finished. Everything that was needed for the earth to have eternal life was finished. Right? God did the same thing again in Jesus. God has come and done a good work. Forget about your good works. They can't give you eternal life.
Right.
They can't pull you out of the grave. They can't seat you at the right hand of God. They can't bring forth life in this earth. Okay? So God's done a good work to give us everything that's needed for life and godliness, and to tell us that this earth we're living in has been redeemed from death.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
This earth is no longer in debt to sin and death.
Right.
It's been bought back by the blood of a human being who had dominion over this earth.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So now we hear the work of what God's done to save the planet.
Yes.
God's done a work to save the planet. Your works can't save the planet.
It's good news.
God's done a
That's
work
right.
to save the planet.
Right.
Okay?
Yep.
And he's done a work to save us and redeem us from death, and to redeem us from the grave, and to give us his life as a free gift. The word of reconciliation is the word of what God has done to give us his glory and his immortality as a free gift,
Yes.
and to baptize the earth in glory and immortality. It's the word of what he's done. Now, that's designed to influence our hearts to the place where we go to rest in his good work.
Yeah.
Just like the first Adam was supposed to enter God's rest in Genesis.
Right.
So the word of reconciliation, what it does is it brings forth faith in us.
Yep.
It brings forth a confident expectation of life. A confident expectation of life. A certainty of life. It brings forth that inside of us.
Yeah.
And it brings forth the love of God inside of us. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And that causes us to go to rest. So the word of reconciliation is just the speaking of the work God's done. So that human beings can hear it. They can hear the work of what God's done. And they can walk in his good work. Because we are his workmanship. And he creates us in his image and likeness. We don't create ourselves
Right.
in his image and likeness.
Right.
Our good works don't create us in his image or his likeness. We don't create the earth.
Right.
in eternal life. It's His good work.
Right.
Now, when we hear about what He's done, it has an impact in our hearts. It removes fear from our hearts because we no longer think that we're separated from life. We see that we've been braided together with that eternal life that's been from the beginning.
Yeah.
And that eternal life that's been from the beginning, guess what? It can't die.
Right.
Even when the death we see in this world came upon that eternal life that's been from the beginning, that eternal life came out of the grave and left death in the grave.
Yeah. Amen.
Right?
Yeah.
And so what happens is that removes the fear from our heart. We're no longer living as if maybe we'll have life or maybe we won't. No. We have a certainty that we have life. Nothing can separate us from it, and nothing can conquer the life we have.
Right.
Okay? Not only that, we live in this earth. And we see that God has done a work so that whatever sin and death we see that's manifested in this earth, it is not going to live forever.
Right.
Death does not have eternal life.
Right.
I'm going to say that again. Death does not have eternal life.
Amen.
I think sometimes we think death has eternal life.
Yeah. I think so.
Death is going to cease to exist. Sometimes we live our lives as if death is the most powerful thing there is.
That's right. There's two things in life are certain, right? Death and taxes.
Taxes might make us feel more death
That's right.
as Americans.
Believe me,
than
I know.
death
Yeah,
does.
that's right.